So, hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Lucy and Tim Show. As always, common sense comment about care. But this time, a very different type of care. Because this is about care for the 49% of the population. And for once, Lucy is outnumbered 2-1 by two men. Because in this episode, we're going to talk about men's health. So, as always on the Lucy and Tim show, I'm joined by Lucy Buxton. Hello, Lucy.
Hello, Tim.
And we have a special guest. We have Lee Trueman. So, Lee, hello, and welcome to the madness that is the Lucy and Tim show.
Hello, nice to be here.
So, Lee, you've been invited as a special guest. We don't have many special guests, you see. You've got to be really special to be a special guest on the Lucy and Tim show because Lucy tells me you have a interest in men's health. But before we talk about that, maybe could you just introduce yourself and what you do for the day job, that pays the Tesco bills and stuff?
Yes, definitely.
You shop at Tesco's?
Not yet. Not yet.
I was going to say, come on, real world.
No.
Okay, let me get
the Aldi bills.
Lee, what pays the Waitrose bills?
Yeah. So my name's Lee. I'm co-founder at Health Automated. So we do an AI care management system. Cheap plug. I've always been interested in men's health, both physical and mental. So I had a cancer diagnosis when I was 19. So managed to kind of get through that. So that's kind of, impacts my sort of mindset. I'm always very positive because I come through that. But always want to spread the word both about physical health and men's mental health as well.
Do you think we talk about it enough?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The mental health piece has started to become a little bit open, but I think the physical health is now starting to lag behind. And I think that there's a lot of common sort of phrases that we see that men need to talk more. And I think people just assume that's when it comes to things like men's mental health, but there's the actual physical health, what even worse are talking about.
Yeah. See, I just wonder whether that's just kind of a lot of it's lip service. And so for me, I'm really interested in it because, I'm super close to my dad, my son, 24-year-old man. So obviously, I love my son dearly. And I distinctly remember some 30 years ago, my dad having a heart attack. And he was out and about with my mum and my brother at Macro at the time. They were out shopping. Well, the dozy nana, he's having a heart attack and he's too busy worrying about, I must protect my wife and my son. Don't want them to get upset and worry about me. Need to make sure they're okay. So he's actually he decides to get back in the car with my mum and my brother and drive 20 miles to his doctor's surgery, turn up on the car park, promptly sick everywhere. And I don't feel very well. And he's having a heart attack. And I've always watched my dad over the years be very much like, he's got to really be ill. And I mean, really ill for him to actually say, I'm ill. I need some help. I need to seek support. And as he's got older, there's been these moments. I distinctly remember 13, 14 years ago, he had to trip a bike pass. It went wrong. And he's there with sepsis, arguing with me, going, you're not ringing an ambulance. And I'm going, I'm ringing an ambulance. I don't care. You're doing as you're told. And these conversations happen more now. He's getting older and a bit more stubborn. Bless him. But he can argue with me a bit less these days. And he kind of listens to kind of where I'm coming from. I'm not having this, Dad, ring the doctors. Where does that all come from? How did you actually seek help did you know you were ill, or did it just find out? Was it just...
No. So I was 19, always wanted to go in the army. So I went down to packing bags as a 19-year-old kid, went down to Lichfield for the physical and aptitude test, physical and mental test. So the aptitude test was nice and easy. I was quite fit then, so doing the actual physical tests was not a problem. And then I had my medical test afterwards. So part of that is pee in a cup. So go off and pee in a cup. You go and do your, I think it's a mile or 2 miles. I can't remember now, but you do your run and you do all the other bleed tests and stuff like that. And you come back and they're going through and they say to me, well, everything seems all right except there's a bit of blood in your eye. Now, me as a 19-year-old kid's like, I can't see it. And they're like, no, that's not how it works. So then they told me what was kind of going on. And I said, well, what's the next step of it going in the army? He's like, well, the next step is you need to go home and see the doctor. So went home, seen the doctor, and then it was gone through a battery of tests, and then they diagnosed me with cancer of the kidney. So luckily, because I'd gone into the army medical tests, they picked it up ridiculously early, like so early. So went to the specialists. I went there with my mum, because obviously that's what a 19-year-old kid does, goes with the mum, because you're not, because a 19-year-old man or 19-year-old boy, as I was then, I wouldn't call myself a man, a 19-year-old boy and a 19-year-old girl, they mature at different levels. At that point, a 19-year-old male doesn't have that kind of, the wherewithal to make those decisions. So I went with my mum, and he said, we can either do chemo, do some tests, or we can just operate, whip it out. He'll only have one kidney, but that's not a problem as long as he's careful. And before I could even say anything, my mum just said, take it out. He's not having a say in the matter, just take it out. So anyway, took it out, been in remission since I was 19. But as that story shows, catching it early is the big key, because that's kind of what it's all about. I was lucky in that, because there's no way you can physically diagnose a cancerous kidney without that test, but it just goes to show that making those checks and doing that on a regular basis is really important, because
You had no symptoms till they tested your urine. There was no blood in your urine that you could see. It was just they tested it and there was blood there.
yes, just traces, yeah.
Because I had the opposite experience about a decade ago teaching a continence course in Hull. And in the break, I went for a pee. And as you're standing there peeing in the urinal, I noticed that I had blood in my urine. So I saw blood.
Yeah.
So I did the responsible thing, which was carried on teaching the course, which is the responsible thing. You can't do that, haven't you? And then I rang my doctors in the lunchtime. I made an appointment. They said, will you come straight away? I said, that'll be difficult. I'm in Hull. I live in South Wales. So I had loads of tests, and then they told me there's 15 reasons you can have blood in your urine, and 3 of them potentially fatal. Lee, I've had all the tests. I've had the MRI, the prostate biopsies. That is not pleasant. You really do need to be sedated.
Yes.
No, mine was kidney stone. I passed the kidney stone. And I never noticed. And I had other kidney stones. I've even got a photograph of my MRI scan showing them. But by the time I went for the treatment, I'd passed them as well. So I'm really fortunate. I didn't have cancer. I've had kidney stones and I had no symptoms other than a bit of blood in the urine. So it scratched my urethra when I passed it. That's it. But I wonder how many people would have just thought, oh, well, let's see how it goes.
Or I'm not going to the doctors when I've got a problem down there.
Because the doctor's going to stick his finger up my bum. Because which is where most men think their prostate is.
So
I'm... Go on. You
no,
go.
you go.
I forgot what I was going to say now.
So have I. So I said you could go.
Isn't dementia wonderful? I've forgotten completely now.
So, right, okay. Thank you for sharing that, Lee. I think, yeah. Thanks for the army. Brilliant.
Just lucky.
Yeah.
Got
Right
lucky.
place, right time.
Absolutely.
But you know, I think it's really key, and I think I kind of want to dig on this a bit. Take Tim's scenario. Actually, this happened to my dad several weeks ago. He's going to kill me. He's took me talking about it, but I was okay. I've gone to pick Little up from work, and my phone rings, and I think, what's he ringing me for? And he literally was ringing me going, I've just been to the loo and I'm peeing blood. And I'm like, okay, you know, and dad's on blood thinners. Let's have a conversation about this. And then obviously he's going through this urgent process and this and that and the other. But the bloke was terrified. Luckily, he can ring his daughter and have that conversation because, you know, been a nurse for over many years. We're close. He can have that conversation. But that was terrifying for him. And that must be like, I can't even imagine what that must be like for a bloke. When blokes stereotypically are, I would say, less likely to take themselves off to the doctor, maybe.
Yeah.
I've got a friend that's having treatment now for bladder cancer. And you know what his symptoms was? Not peeing blood. He had a pain in his leg. And his pain in his leg, in his thigh, wouldn't go. So eventually he goes to the doctor, say, I've got this pain in my leg. And he hasn't got cancer that spread to his leg. It's still in his bladder. Well, it's gone now. But that gave him pain in his leg. So he's quite open about talking about it. So he has these scans. So I said, did you see what it looked like? He said, yeah, it looked like a raspberry on the inside of my bladder, growing on the wall of the inside of the bladder, like a raspberry. Now, I'm a bit fascinated by that because I too have seen the inside of my bladder on the big screen. Not a pleasant experience. But yeah, like a raspberry growing on the inside. But his symptom was a pain in his leg. He even though he's had really grueling treatment, and the treatment is medicine into the bladder via a catheter. Actually, the same medicine that we were given as a BCG vaccine all of those years ago. He thinks himself lucky because his was caught really early. But for him, it's the rest of his life now, and he's only 43. But pain in his leg, thought he'd overdone it, thought he'd strained it.
But at
Isn't
least
that
he paid attention and did something about it.
eventually, Lucy?
But that's the
Eventually.
point. Eventually. So
Yeah.
what is it? What is it that stops men, and I'm generalizing here, what is it stops a large proportion of men actually going, do you know what? Something's wrong. I need to go to see the doc.
What do you reckon, Lee? Why don't men go to doctors?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is to do with the stoicism we have when we're brought up as men. 'Cause when you get brought up by another man, not necessarily now, because we're starting to break the cycle now. We're starting to, as parents, as a parent of a boy myself, I know that I've tried to break some of those cycles, and it's okay to talk about your feelings. Let's sit down and talk about them. But I think in the older generations, there's a lot of stoicism. It's a lot about. I was raised to go, yeah, it'll go away. Just ignore it'll go away. If it doesn't go away after a while, then you can go and see the doctors. But definitely don't go and bother the doctor straight away. And I think it's this when we hear the phrases "men need to talk more," we just assume that that's to do with mental health when we're talking more about mental health now. So I think physical health is the one that's now lagging behind. So we've got up to, we still need to talk about mental health a lot more, but our physical health, we don't. And I think as men, there's two words that strike fear into every man's heart, and that's erectile dysfunction. Even now, I feel like the fact I need to defend myself and say it hasn't happened to me. But that's just how us men were programmed. It's fine. It happens to everyone. Not me though. But I think there's very few men who would go and see a doctor about erectile dysfunction quite quickly. That would be something that drags on, and erectile dysfunction, it's not kind of like the be all and end all. It's just a symptom of a wider problem. So normally things like heart disease, high cholesterol, blood pressure, diabetes, obesity,
Parkinson's.
and
Parkinson's
stress.
is a symptom as well.
So, is that an ego thing? Is that taken as a, well, I've got erectile dysfunction, so I'm less of a man. Is it emasculating? I mean, I don't know.
It must be. I can't really. I mean, I've not really experienced it, but we are kind of like as men, kind of brought up that that's where the manhood is. Because we even say like, when you go to the doctors, another PC word for it is it's my manhood, and that's what we call it, isn't it? So there's definitely a big identity with men when it comes to the equipment downstairs and the equipment not working.
And I wonder how much that goes back to kind of like ultimately the kind of the procreation and kind of the passed down through generation roles of a male, you know, the typical male roles of hunter gatherer and provider. And we talked about this in other shows. I think we might even have talked about it last on the menopause show, about if we go back to caveman days, this is how where women ended up who lived together. The man would go off and hunt and gather. He would come back, and the women were living together. And the fact that you can actually smell estrogen on women's pheromones, that they ended up then in cycle, so that the man who'd been out to hunt, he'd gone and killed his mammoth, he'd come back, and then he could procreate with 5 or 6 women. They'd all be pregnant. He'd go out, and then that protected kind of evolution. So there were like 5 or 6 kids that were going to be born, of which we know not all of them would have survived. And that's kind of move forward. So I wonder how much it kind of comes from that. And then how much of it's come from the kind of societal pressures around kind of like the patriarchy and men not being able to do those things that are potentially perceived to be more feminine nature, like talking, which obviously you can see I do sometimes. A lot.
I just think in men's heads, it's an admission of a sign of weakness.
Oh, that's interesting.
And if you watch the nature programs, watch what happens in all these nature programs where the lion who's the king of the pride, and then it starts to get a little bit wobbly. And what happens before too long is the young pretender comes along, and I think as soon as it shows signs of weakness, the male of the species, they're likely to be usurped and cast out. So I just think that's why men don't show weakness, because we fear that we're like going to be replaced by the young pretender. Maybe it's part of our hardwired psyche.
Maybe it is. That's really
But it kills,
interesting.
but it kills people, doesn't it, though?
Well, it does, and me being like about my NLP and paying attention to words. Lee said there's this thing about men need to talk more. Well, that to me says that there's either not much talking going on, or very little talking. And how much is this stuff actually, talked about? So my son's really open with me, and I'm open with him about things. We talk, it's not a problem. That's how it's been. And my son will cry. But my 80-year-old father, who was raised in a different generation, he only now cries now my mom's died. Never saw him cry before.
I reckon Lee is right. I think two blokes are more likely now to talk about how they are getting on mentally than they would be to talk about physical health problems.
Yeah.
I wonder if there must be, mustn't there? There must be two blokes who are meeting up for a drink in the pub tonight. And they'll probably have a chat about how they're feeling. But I don't think one's going to say to the other, how are you getting on downstairs? Can you still get it up? I just don't think that conversation's happening.
No, and even though the little blue tablets are around and that's great to get some help, how much is
See, look,
that?
you're even saying the little blue tablets. Hang on a minute. I was sat here talking about estrogen, testosterone, HRT. We should be talking about Viagra here.
Yeah. Even with Viagra, and that's a good thing. But how is that really a good thing, or is it kind of just a
Quick
stick
fix.
and plaster to go over a big gaping wound?
Especially
Because
now we can order it off the internet.
yeah, you can order it off the internet. You can do a little online consultation, and that then removes the need for you to go to the doctor to actually see what the root cause of it is.
And be honest and vulnerable.
Yeah, that's the hardest bit. That's the hardest bit. But we've got groups like Man Down and other mental health support groups now for both for men and women. So men have support groups for mental health. So when we're not doing it great, we can seek out one of these groups, go and see them, talk with our peers. But there's no support group for sort of actual physical health. There might be support groups once you get a diagnosis, but a generalized, because there's a lot of these generalized support groups for general mental health, but there's no general support group for just generalized men's health. It's
And
all
and
pain.
you know, the two go in hand, don't they? You know, I think we've very much like medical models separate them. You see a doctor talk about your balls and whatever else, and then you see a doctor to talk about your lungs, or you see a doctor to talk about your brain. But fundamentally, if you've got erectile dysfunction, that's going to affect you on a psychological level.
Yeah,
That's going to affect how you perceive yourself, but you're then going to start thinking, well, if I'm not performing there, am I performing in my role, in my job? That's going to impact your self-esteem. The two they're intrinsically linked. So this talking more, is it about we need to talk more holistically, not necessarily just about mental health? And actually, we need to just be able as men to talk more.
yeah. We just need to be able to talk, and it's about a great deal of situations. Sometimes it's about, like you say, mental health, but then it's very likely to I'm going down the pub for a pint and I'll tell someone that I've just checked the testicles out. You're not going to do that, but it's an important part of being a man. It's what we need to do because early identification is gives you the best chance for survival, for a good
See,
outcome.
so that's really interesting. And this is, I think, something the difference between men and women. So I've been out with a girlfriend today. Not seen her in 6 months. And we're chatting away, and before you know it, I'm telling her about my breast lumps that I had several months ago, and I had to go through my scan and my mammogram. And then she pops up and says, "Oh, I've had one of those." And that's a conversation that happens often with women. It's easy for us to talk about this stuff, but
Yeah.
for men, it's
So I've got two relatives who passed away from cancer. I mean, I must get be the most unluckiest guy. So my nan passed away of breast cancer, and my granddad, on the other side, wasn't the same. And my granddad passed away of lung, liver, and bone cancer. Now, my nan was very open about her pain levels and how much she was struggling, how much she was suffering. But my granddad was lung, liver, and bone cancer. Probably the most painful in terms of the cancers because it just gets into your bones and it's just awful. They're riddled with it. But he was getting up every day, getting a shave. When anyone asked him how he was feeling, it was always like, "I'm fine. I don't feel in that much pain." And I remember being there when the doctor was there with my granddad. He was asking him the questions. And he was saying, "No, I'm not too bad. I don't feel too bad. It gives me a little bit of grief, but nothing I can't handle with." And the doctor's like, "I think you might be lying." It's like, because bone cancer is literally one of the most painful things. You need to be honest about your pain levels so we can give you the right amount of medication. And it took him a while to actually be honest about how much pain he was actually in because he didn't want to cause a fuss. And that's probably not a sort of isolated incident.
So where do you think that's come from things like
I think the
the narrative
parents
we hear of man
definitely.
up, or you need to suck it up, or don't be a wuss, or
It's all of those negative stereotypes, all of those, like you say, pull your socks up, man up, come on, get yourself together. And I
feisty
think,
baby, that was something that I would have heard like as a kid.
yeah, 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 don't be a little baby. I think all of those things do
Don't be a
impact
crybaby.
men.
Yeah. So are we doing 49% of the population a disservice by the way we're bringing them up?
I think it's when we're talking openly about a subject like this, we have to generalize, don't we? We can't sort of, but I think there's a portion of the 49% of people who break the mold. But I think it's going to be next generations because I think all the people who have had the negative experiences from all of these sort of outdated theories and outdated principles. So people like myself, who's now raising a boy of his own, then it's up to us to break that cycle and to refuse to use things
But
like "man up, mate, get up," or when they're in pain, just encourage them to come forward and encourage them to speak and be open about their feelings. But I think it's change needs to be broken, doesn't it? Because if you just
Yeah, we have to get off the treadmill at some point, don't we? And this is something that I've reflected on quite a lot, and it's something actually I see quite a lot in my work and kind of coaching kids and stuff, and how I can see the difference between the parent generation. Now I've reflected a lot on my parents, and only Saturday I was talking to my dad. My dad's different. He wasn't raised with a dad. His dad died when he was a little boy. And he was raised around a family of very strong women that were all sisters, whose husbands were these women, they worshipped these women. They didn't dare put their foot out of line, kind of thing. Um, and my dad is what I would class as a complete true gentleman.
yeah,
But even now, he will. I mean, I have to stand there if we're in the garden and I go, right, you've had enough, stop. And for him, his purpose is about service for other people. It always has been as a man. And my son's completely different. My son is, yeah, he'll do stuff, but you know what? He knows that he's got that value he holds in himself too, and that's a completely different narrative. Um, in those generations, and I think that's come about because as a mom, I've gone, actually, no, it didn't work, Dad. I've reflected, that doesn't work. I want to give my son an opportunity to let's get off the treadmill and have it a different way. I think I think women need to support and empower men more, as we are seeing a lot of men supporting and empowering women around the menopause and the perimenopause journey. I think there's a lot more we can do if we come together.
100%, 100%. It's just about, and I think that brings up another interesting point about the sort of Gen Z and people like that because we've heard it in the workplace where sort of Gen Zs and people will throw out terms like snowflakes and
Woke.
look at them, the woke, they're all whinging, but they are more braver than we ever were. So for them to step up and say, no, this isn't what work environment should be like. I'm not happy with it. Whereas we would never dare to say anything like that because we'd be worried we were going to we'd get fired if we spoke out of line. Whereas like the newer generations are starting to say, no, this isn't okay.
And you
And I
know
think
what? As a generation, they are struggling with their mental well-being. But I I'm willing to put my hand up and say they're struggling because as a generation they are so intuitive, they are so empathetic, and they are calling out the generation's worth of rubbish.
yeah,
And they go and they're confused. They're getting told one narrative when they go to school or by parents who are still in that suck it up, buttercup kind of. narrative. And then they're going, oh, hang on a minute, this is not how it needs to be. They don't care. They care about the person. And that's what's different. And I think that they are going to be a world-changing generation.
Yeah,
and I'd like to
absolutely.
see that as a generation that they are able to continue to change the narrative. I mean, I've got an equal split of girls and male and female that I coach, the kids that I coach, and that to me is wonderful that these lads I'm seeing coming through are having really honest conversations about some really big topics, especially with me as a mum and as a woman.
Yeah.
I just had to Google what a Gen Z was because I never know which is which. That's bad, isn't it?
Innie.
But I know what it is now. I Googled it. Google told me.
Okay.
So I never know which is which. That's bad, isn't it?
No, have you needed to know?
I never know what I am. Born in 1966.
So are you Generation X?
I have no idea. But Google knows, doesn't it?
Google knows everything.
I am a
So is
Generation
that
X.
another problem? Google knows everything. So if I've got a problem, do I just go to Google and then because I've asked Google, I'm just going to not deal with it anymore because I've looked on Google and it scared the absolute rockets off me.
Put it this way, it knows this, and it says people between roughly 1965 and 1980 are Generation X. There you are.
That'll be me in there as well.
Pardon?
That'll be me in there as well. Was that who did that song, wasn't it? Was it the Who did Generation X? Can't
Did
remember
they?
who it was.
Oh, you've got Tim on another Google now. So Lee, what about my random point about the fact that you think blokes are more likely to go to Google and say, oh,
Absolutely.
and then they
Absolutely.
scare
But not
themselves.
only, yeah, not only blokes, my other half does it. She'll literally get a stomach bug and then she'll go into Google and then I'll come home and she's got cancer. And she's like starting to like, she asked me the other day, can I order a blood pressure machine off the internet? Not that she needs my permission, but I've just stopped her from getting, like, under no circumstances order a blood pressure machine because you'll be ill every day, because
Yeah,
you'll be checking it every day.
yeah.
And I think, yeah, as a society, we go to Google too much. We go to Dr. Google. The
Dr.
issue there,
TikTok.
TikTok, Google, but the issue there is that while Google might have all the answers, do we have all the questions? Are we asking the right questions? Have we identified our symptoms properly to put into Google? Because if I put into Google bad stomach pain, then it might say, yeah, the chances are big list, and down at the bottom of
Yeah.
one of them could be cancer.
I had bad stomach pain on Friday. Google would never have known the cause. And do you know what it was? Eating spicy Indian food for 2 days consecutively. Google was never going to get that one, was it?
No, no, no. I mean, especially if you didn't put that in there. So, what is your go-to spicy Indian food then?
Well, actually, I didn't know what any of it was at all because it was in proper Indian restaurant. I didn't choose it, and the people that did choose it knew about Indian food, and they just said, "Have this, you'll like it." But I know I did have chili mogo. You know what chili mogo is?
No.
Okay, so it's chips made of cassava in chili oil. Then I had a rice cake and a thing that looked like not a pancake, a donut. And then I had a chicken dosa. This is not Indian food like your local Indian takeaway. It's proper Indian food.
Yeah.
And my friend said, "Oh, it's not that spicy." I went, "For you lot, it is not." And then on Friday, unfortunately, spicy Indian food, and a lack of a gallbladder. I don't have a gallbladder. That disappeared in 2020. It had an effect on my stomach. See, Google wasn't going to sort that out, was it?
No, 100%. And that's, like I say, Google's a great resource, but are we the best resource to put that information into Google to find out what it is that our symptoms are? I don't think we are. I don't think we're qualified. That's why doctors have to go to medical school for so long to be able to, yeah, ask the right questions and identify reason. Is it like a grinding pain in your stomach? Is there a stabbing? Is it shooting? Is it dull pain? All these things could take the diagnosis in 10 different ways. So yeah, I think Google is a bit dangerous when we're feeling a little bit poorly.
Yeah, yeah. So we need to educate our next generation and break this generational cycle of trauma that we keep passing on about these narratives that are not helpful. We need to be very mindful about going to Dr. Google. If we were to put 20 blokes in a pub and say you can only have your pint of beer if you're honest, and we were to ask them the question, would you seek help off your doctor if you were concerned? What do you think they'd say?
It depends what they're concerned about. You've got to give it some more context than that.
Well, let's use Lee's one that's going to make them all very uncomfortable and say, would you seek help if you had erectile dysfunction? How many do you think would actually stand there and put their hands up?
I think the majority would just order some blue pills off the internet.
That's a real shame. So
I think so. Okay, I think a percentage wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Small percentage.
they'd bury their head in the sand or do denial.
I think a small percentage would do denial. I think a small percentage wouldn't care. I think the majority would order some blue pills off the internet, or they might know someone who'd ordered some blue pills off the internet and get them to
Yeah,
do it.
mate, try one of these.
Yeah.
And then I reckon about 3 of them will go to doctors.
Yeah. So, and that kind of brings my question back to a subset of those first people who are not going to do anything. So, if we say there's 100 people in a pub, we say 50% of them aren't going to do nothing. So, we've got 50 people there. And that then brings us to that question of how many people are going to do nothing and deal with it in a kind of self-destructive way. So how many of those people who have got erectile dysfunction and not going to see a doctor, they're not going to get little blue pills, how many of those are going to start to push their loved ones away from them? How many are going to kind of deal with it with kind of in a negative mind, and then will start to develop sort of depression or something along that nature because they haven't done it? So it's not just you're ignoring the fact they've got erectile dysfunction, it's then how did they deal with that? Because that's a bad situation that they're dealing with. They're dealing with it on their own in silence, and the chances of that only negatively impacting them, I think, is very minimal. It could have an impact on their loved ones. It could have an impact on how their mental health goes. It could be something that they might have very minor depression, and because of they're ignoring that erectile dysfunction, that could kind of make that situation 10 times worse.
I mean, it could be that they get, like you said, withdrawn. It could be then that their partner's like, well, don't you fancy me anymore? Have you got another woman? And then it just kind of crescendos, doesn't it? Or it could even be that they become angry.
Yeah.
They're not pleasant to be around. And
that's an important point that you've just raised then, because if a man does have erectile dysfunction, their partner's initial reaction is massively important. So if that reaction is, oh, don't you fancy me anymore, even if those words are not said, that can have tremendous psychological damage, cause tremendous psychological damage to the man. So it's not even what they say, it's the initial reaction that could be really important. It's a medical problem. I think there's a stigma around it as well. There's jokes about it, aren't there?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
there's jokes about everything.
because obviously the world has changed a little bit, but if you look at the one man in the world who's got kind of almost like a universal respect from other men is Pele. Pele, great footballer, everyone loves him, people looked up to him. Now, he took I can't even remember what year it was years and years ago, but he did a series of adverts for erectile dysfunction. And he got mocked relentlessly because of it. And that was someone like Pele. So it's yeah, it's a completely it's just so highly stigmatized. It's absolutely such a ludicrous situation.
But if you think about it, how far does this go back about man's genitalia? I don't know whether YouTube are going to censor me, else I would use the proper anatomical words. But are they, that goes right the way back. Think about Zeus, the god, in Greece, and those statues with this fantastic, muscular, rippling body and this great big.
Yeah, Michelangelo's David.
Yeah, those images are around us everywhere saying, this is what you should look like.
Yeah,
All of the jokes about men don't know how to measure properly and all the stigma around that.
yeah,
Is this just another way of keeping men in that box, not actually advocating for themselves, speaking up, seeking support, saying, I matter?
yeah. It's
I
just
didn't know that YouTube censored us.
Huh?
I didn't know that
YouTube.
we got. So if
Can't
we
share. So
if
if
we,
I was to get,
if
if
we
I
say
was,
bad words, we get censored.
well, you can do. But it's a lot of images as well. So if I was to say,
Don't say it. Don't say it. Shush.
no, 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 no. If I was to say, for example, I'm not saying, I'm using that as an expression. If I was to get tarot cards out and shuffle tarot cards, and there was a picture on one of the tarot cards with a lady with her buzzwams on show, then YouTube will filter and censor the video and potentially take it down. So you see lots of people who say tarot card readers on YouTube, and they've scribbled out the
Okay.
defining features that
I
show
got
whether the physique is female or male.
I got censored by LinkedIn
No.
in
You,
post.
guru of LinkedIn, who
I
has
did.
got 10,000 followers.
I did a LinkedIn post, and the picture I put with it had the S word in the picture. And do you know how many views I got? One, which was the LinkedIn algorithm, and that was it. So I
No.
then
We
I then
know that Tim is not going to become a sex therapist where he talks about sex on LinkedIn.
are you allowed to say that on YouTube?
Well, I've just said it, we'll see.
Lee, she might have blown it. We might never see the light of day. But
that's
if we're
a
not
cutting
allowed,
room floor.
do you know what? If we're not allowed to say that word, Lucy, someone edit it out, won't he?
Yeah, I'm sure he's very good like that.
Yeah.
So we've nattered on for about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
We haven't really been very jovial, have we, Lucy, this time? Because it's quite a serious episode.
Yeah, and I think it's really important because there's so much out there about women and their needs, and we need to make it clear that it's not about women. It needs to be about men. It needs to be about kids. It needs to be about people. It doesn't matter what your gender is. Fundamentally, we all have physical, mental, emotional, spiritual health, and we all have a right to access support when that equilibrium is out of balance.
And we've got to give ourselves permission to go and get it.
Yeah, we have. And we've got to break this cycle. We've got to get off the treadmill. We've got to stop this narrative that's going to our children, because it will then go to their children's children. And this is stuff, this is rubbish that's been passed through the generations. It has to stop.
Yeah, there's no excuse anymore. I mean, we probably our parents had the excuse that we didn't know we were damaging our children. Now we know,
Yeah.
we've got that information. We know we're the people who are speaking vocal about how difficult it is when we're not talking to each other. So I think it then just comes down to, you need to be the change you want to see in the world. So if you want
Yeah.
to see a change happen, then you can't start a revolution from your sofa. You've got to get up
And
and
it,
you've got
and
to,
it has to happen. You know, more and more we are seeing stories of men ending their own lives. Only last week, a friend of mine messaged me and she said her partner had just ended his own life. It doesn't have to be that way.
it's absolutely, I mean, I've been sort of down that road with sort of thoughts. And it's, people just assume that people just want to take their lives. It's not the fact that people want to take their lives, it's the fact that people get to a position where the thought of living is so bleak, so horrifying that they feel they've got no choice but to take their life. And I think, yeah, it's
And they
just,
just want it to stop.
yeah, all they want is some peace, all they want is reprieve. And if you look, obviously, the suicide rate for men is a little bit higher than women. No one should ever take their own life. But if you look at, traditionally, men have had that financial pressure put on top of them as they're the ones who need to be the
The
provider.
breadwinner, the provider.
Absolutely. And that financial pressure is inescapable. It is when you are in there. It's just, yeah, you just can't get past it because it's like, it's something that just doesn't go away. You want to get a drink. Well, that's going to cost money. You want to go and get some food, and cost money. You want to take the kids somewhere. You want to just, something as simple as, it might be picking the kids up from school. Has still got, you've got a fuel cost or you've got public transport cost. It's just something that financial pressure, it just doesn't go anywhere, and it's just, it can be quite crippling. But then some people have just got sort of a different mind, and that's not wrong. We just need to make sure that the people who have got a mind that operates in a different way have got that support, they've got that comfort to be able to talk to someone to make sure that they don't feel alone. Because
Yeah. And for people that think that maybe I won't be missed. I mean, it's interesting you saying that, because I mean I've raised my two on my own for 20 odd years. That financial burden has always been on my shoulders.
yeah,
It's tough. But you see, the thing is, as a single mom, I have literally, my narrative is, it doesn't matter how tough it is, I have to keep getting up because they keep getting up. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
But if you're a dad or you're a man and you haven't got that thing, and that thing that's kind of greater in your perception to fight for, yeah, I get it.
yeah,
It's tough.
I remember my first awareness of people taking their own life, and I must have been about 7. And when I was 7, there was a recession. It was the early 1970s. And our next door neighbor did have a job. And then he got a job as a door-to-door salesman trying to sell vacuum cleaners, commission only. And it didn't work out for him. And he took his own life. And as a 7-year-old, when a bloke that you see regularly, like every day, is not there anymore. Yeah, I remember being really upset and shocked that that kind of thing would happen. And it must have been someone that was probably, I don't know, 20 years older than me. And that should be someone who should be now 10 years into retirement in their like late 70s now, that person should be. I don't remember his name. I'm trying to rack my brain to try and remember his name, but it's not there. But that's like 50 years of life lost. That's children who were never born, grandchildren that were never born, all because he didn't have a job and couldn't see any future.
Yeah. Didn't feel he had a choice.
And that's 50 years ago, and nothing, and it's getting worse now, isn't it?
It is. It is. I think we've got the highest level of suicide in probably 20, 30 years. I mean, I'm not like, I saw something a few weeks ago, but I can't remember exactly the statistics. And I think for me, I think it's about us actually taking the time for men and for women, but we're talking about men today, is to say, are you really okay? Are you? Because that's something I do with my dad and with my son. I make the point of saying, you're not okay. What is it? We need to talk about this. And when we talk about it, we move through it and we can find a solution. And it's important to do.
That's making me think of something. I've got a client that's going through a bit of difficulty at the moment with the regulator. So I'm there in a professional capacity to try and sort out their compliance issues. But not every time, but most times when we have a conversation, at some point during the conversation, I ask him how he is doing. Because it's not every time, it's when I sense I need to ask. And he always says that I'm the only one that ever asks. Because I think that's important, because when you're going through a rough time, business-wise, then it can be incredibly consuming. And I've been in that position as a provider of care when it's been rough. And sometimes you can't share that with your partner and your family because you don't want to burden them. And I don't think anybody ever asked me how I was doing. And I think if they had have asked me, I don't think I'd have told them. And I don't think I'd have told them for fear that if I let my guard down and exposed myself, I would just crumble. But I didn't realize that at the time. It's only years later, with wisdom that comes with age and experience, do I reflect and think, I was just about holding it together for a lot of years.
Yeah, that's really profound.
And when we talk about people thinking of ending it all, I've had thoughts like that.
Have I?
I've been talked out of it once by my wife. And it's not easy to admit that. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but there's a way out for everyone. And you've just got to be brave to not just go and get help. You've just got to be brave enough to admit to yourself that you're not weak because you need a bit of help.
I think asking for help is a sign of strength. It's a sign of, I want to be here. I want to find my way through this. And obviously, my own journey as a mom and supporting my daughter through her not wanting to live, and actually sometimes we just need somebody to say, I'm here. We'll get through it together. We'll do it together. But a lot of people just can't. So I think what I want to do is say to anybody watching this, reach out. any one of us will listen to you, and I'll make sure to put in the description some organisations that people can contact. And it just needs, all you need to do is send a message and say, I need help. And no matter what, people, and it's one thing I know that social care is pretty good at doing. There's lots of groups and messages, and if somebody needs help, somebody will know somebody who can help. But it has to come from somebody saying, I need help.
I think at that point, we should conclude.
I think so. So where will we all be in a few weeks?
We'll be at the care show.
We will. You're at the care show, aren't you, Lee?
Yes, I'm at the Car Show. I am hosting the Technology Theatre on day one, so looking forward to that. We've got lots of really, really good talks, and I will be on a panel discussion day two, about AI ethics and social care. So really looking forward to that one as well, and that's on day two. So
And
yeah.
what you doing? And what are you doing at 2 o'clock on day two?
I'm coming to see you guys talk. Yeah.
You are. You
See,
absolutely are.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
impressed. We hadn't even prompted him, Tim.
Yeah. I'm automatically there. I know where I need to be.
But you think though, you'll be the only one there because they put us on at the same time as the CQC.
Scheduling conflict.
I know. Isn't that bad? So that's what we're doing. We're going to press gang people, aren't we? We're going to have t-shirts say, don't listen
You
to
know
the
what
C.
it's like? It's like having something on BBC One and something on ITV, and you want to watch them both, but you haven't got a video recorder or a smart TV. Like, it's like
Yeah.
back in the day how it used to be before VCRs came about.
You need to pull a Scooby-Doo trick where you get CQC time and your time and then swap them over. And then everyone comes to yeah.
We're just going to put a big notice outside the main theatre. CQC talk cancelled. Go and instead.
Yeah.
Right, Lucy, stop the recording.
I'm stopping it. I'm stopping it.
Stop in it.
He's such a nagly, he really is.